Have you ever been on the receiving end of someone's intense anger despite never having met them? Ever faced hostility from a stranger who bears a grudge you don't understand, even though you've done nothing wrong? Have you ever been the target of sudden violence with no explanation or warning? Has someone's unchecked rage ever escalated to the point where your life was placed in danger, without cause and without justice?
Maybe not the last
This
one.
is the true, solved story of the Kobe student incident.
Solved. Let's go. Actually solved.
While solved, this is a pretty frustrating case due to the details you'll soon discover. But if you've watched anything from me before, I suppose you're accustomed to such feelings. If you're a returning viewer or someone new to the channel, welcome. I make videos in Japanese cases, strange, solved and unsolved.
I've been watching for years.
Something you think you'll find interesting, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. In any case, let's get on with the video. Shota Tsutsumi was a 16-year-old high school student who lived in the North Ward of Kobe, a city in Hyogo Prefecture. He was the youngest of 4 siblings, with an unnamed older brother and 2 unnamed older sisters. As the youngest child, his mother described Shota as being very cute, seeing as he was a teenager among adults. Shota's father, Satoshi, worked as an electrician, and although I can't be certain due to the lack of information, his mother Masako appears to have been a housewife who took care of the children, typical of Japanese family life. Shota was described by his father as a very ordinary boy. In his elementary school days, he devoted himself to playing baseball, his favorite sport. He went on to study at Kobe Koryo Gakuen, one of the prefecture's leading baseball powerhouses, but eventually gave up on baseball club activities because he felt his abilities were lacking when compared to his peers. Still, he had a strong attachment to his beloved sport and a lot of talent, and so dedicated some of his time to supporting and training the younger junior high students in their practice instead. His father claimed that while Shota didn't really study much, meaning his class textbooks were like new at the end of the school year, Shota read pro baseball player dictionaries over and over until the books became completely worn out.
He was that much of a fan.
That's not to say that Shota was lazy or lacked ability. In fact, he was very hardworking and simply chose to follow his passions. In order to save money to acquire a motorcycle license as soon as he was able, he worked a part-time job twice a week at a golf course. He also studied in his own time about road and biking rules to ensure he passed the examination. During the school summer holidays, he would also work part-time under his father Satoshi in the electrical business, where Shota proved to be enthusiastic and eager to learn. Satoshi stated that even when it became extremely hot during that season in Japan, Shota wouldn't complain and kept working, which made him feel very proud of his son. Shota also hit it off with the other employees, despite being much younger than them. When Satoshi asked if Shota would like to continue the business in his father's footsteps, Shota reacted with joy and eagerness, exclaiming, "Really? Can I?" It seemed Shota was excited about his future and had much to live for. According to his mother Masako, Shota was in his rebellious teenage years at 16, but he was always open and kind and would often talk to her about many things he had experienced in school. He was far from being a closed book like many others at his age. Speaking of school, Shota was a very popular person, having many friends, male and female alike.
He feels very main character,
as being very social, someone who spoke a lot and had a positive vibe, even if things were not going so great. One classmate said, he was the life of the party, cheerful and a good person. But it wasn't just people Shota was kind to, he also formed a bond with and became responsible for the family pet, a dog named Eve, which he would take on daily walks. Sadly, very little else is known about Shota. It's always hard to make accurate judgments about such things.
I mean, it already seems like a good amount, you know. He seems like a good guy, genuinely, which is why it's sad that we know where this is going.
But from the comments of family and friends, it seems like he was an ordinary, happy kid with a normal, loving family, and he never deserved what happened to him. On Monday the 4th of October 2010, Shota went to the Tsutsumi Koen with about 10 of his classmates at around 6 PM. Since the park was adjacent to Jusko, a large shopping center, it was a popular hangout location for the neighborhood kids after school and on the weekends. Among the group was Shota's girlfriend, 15-year-old Y. Her name and personal pictures are actually public, but since details about her are purposefully left anonymous since sources about the incident, I'll follow suit, especially considering she's been the subject of unjust slander. The group of friends just spent their time as kids do, chatting, laughing, eating, drinking soft drinks and playing games. Before long, however, they slowly returned home one after the other. Shota too returned home before long, as did his girlfriend separately. Upon doing so, however, the two began messaging each other via their mobile phones and arranged to meet up later that night, just the two of them. Since they cannot meet easily at school and were with others before, such meetings were precious times for them. Shota sent some messages saying, "Let's meet at the vending machine corner around 10 PM. Like the park, this was a relatively popular hangout area for local kids who wished to chat and have a drink, albeit for small groups. After enjoying a meal together with his family and watching a TV drama show, Shota said, "I'm going to meet a friend," and left the home. Satoshi, shouting over his shoulder without looking at his son, told him to come back soon since it was already getting late. This would be the last time he would ever speak to his son. Shota met up with his girlfriend Y, and they both bought some canned juice to sip while enjoying each other's company. Beside the vending machines and in front of an old tobacco stand was a large step, so they sat down there to relax. Things started off happy.
Seems like a good night date.
For around 30 minutes, and during that time, a passerby they didn't know walked past in front of them. The couple didn't think much of it and continued talking and drinking their juice. However, soon after this, they noticed that the same person didn't continue along on their way, but had instead stopped and was sitting on a railing about 10 meters away from their location. He was staring at them, saying nothing, and not moving. He was wearing a black jersey and trousers, so it was hard to make him out clearly against the darkness.
And even as an adult, like, if I have to go outside at night, it feels kind of, you know, like you have this double level of, like, being wary of strangers, right? Like, even as an adult, yeah, I would be terrified at 16 outside like this at night and someone is staring at me.
He had long, unkempt black hair that curled outwards at the bottom. He was described as being slightly plump, having thick eyebrows and narrow eyes. He was also said to look like he was in his late 20s or early 30s. The two tried to enjoy their conversation and drinks, but naturally having someone glaring at them under the night sky was a little unsettling. This continued on for a few minutes. The girlfriend eventually whispered to Shota, "That guy's giving me the creeps," to which Shota replied with, "Seriously?" Honestly, who wouldn't be unnerved in such an unusual situation? It's clearly not a normal thing for someone to do, especially a complete stranger. Shortly after this, the man rose from the railing and slowly
sinking on the Shota video.
Silently.
Is it a jealousy
thing? The
thing?
time was around 10:40 PM. Before they even knew what was going on, the unknown person pulled out a short, 10-centimeter long knife and cruelly brought it down on the defenseless Shota without warning. Shota immediately shouted to his girlfriend to run away, while he courageously held off the attacker and tried to defend himself. The girlfriend ran as fast as her legs could carry her, but Shota was struck repeatedly before he could run too. He fell forward to the ground, and the assailant managed to get on top of his back. With no way to defend himself, there was little innocent Shota could do. After the girlfriend had run as far as she could, she stopped. Shota was nowhere to be seen. Naturally worried, she returned back to the scene of the attack, towards potential danger. At a location roughly 70 to 80 meters from the vending machine corner, where the couple had been happily chatting away, was Shota. He was lying in the middle of the road on a zebra crossing. He had already lost consciousness, and both he and the ground around him was stained red. Shota had run from his attacker in a desperate final attempt to escape. He was unsuccessful. The girlfriend called the police at 10:49 PM from her mobile phone, as did a driver who had happened upon the scene a minute later. The girlfriend also contacted Shota's friends afterwards, one of whom, a close family friend, ran to the Tsutsumi family home to inform them of the situation.
I see.
The friend rang the home intercom and spoke to Satoshi. The friend said, "It sounds like Tsutsumi has been stabbed." The father couldn't believe what he was hearing at first, saying, "You're lying. What are you talking about? After all, who would expect such a thing to happen?" The friend, however, repeated his statement more firmly, and although Satoshi was still confused and not truly buying it, he started to become concerned. Since the scene of the attack was very close to the family home, Satoshi ran out to his son, Shota, along with the friend. Satoshi saw his son on the ground. Police cars with flashing lights covered the area, and paramedics were administering urgent care. It is a sight no father should ever have to see. He shouted his son's name, Shota, and held his hand while kneeling on the ground. Satoshi was in a complete state of confusion and fear for his son. He didn't know what happened, and he didn't know how his son was doing.
It was literally a random attack. Was it like an incel that was jealous of a couple, basically?
The following is what happened.
Is that what it is?
処置室に呼ばれて、もう脳波に反応がないんですよ。で、心臓マッサージ止めていいですかって、言われて、で、その止めんといてくれって。
Oh man, it's painful to see the real guy.
うち次女看護師やねんね。みんなもうお父さんも翔太かわいそうやからもう寝かしてあげてって。
That's fucking sad.
でそれでもう心臓マッサージやめたんかな。
Shota Tsutsumi sadly passed away at 12:26 a.m. the 5th of October 2010. He was just 16 years old, the youngest of 4 siblings from a happy home. Friendly, popular Shota was gone forever. He was just 6 days shy of celebrating his 17th birthday. The North Kobe police force immediately began a murder investigation from that very night. They shut down the roads to the crime scene and started an intense forensic analysis of the area. Every moment counted, and so they were extremely quick, proactive, and thorough. From the vending machine call,
which, you know, I feel like in a lot of cases like this, and even the KyotoRobato videos, isn't always like that. We often have, like, you know, the cops were slow. They weren't, like, doing the right things right away, like shutting off the block or something. So for once, it seems like they're doing things the right way.
Where the couple was sitting to the road where Shota was found, they discovered a sporadic blood trail that matched Shota's desperate escape route. But sadly, little else was uncovered at the site itself. No lost items or physical evidence from either party. Naturally, investigators also began interviewing the locals, focusing on those who lived in the immediate area, as well as the girlfriend and other friends of Shota's. Locals reported hearing Shota shout, "Run away, why? Go! It hurts!" and "Help me!" and also reported hearing he and the girlfriend scream.
低い声でうわーっていう声でした。ライオンが獣をそういう時のような感じがしましたけどね。ともかく助けて助けての2回の声がすごく大きい声だったので。
After getting all the details I previously shared about the perpetrator through an exhaustive questioning of the girlfriend, including obtaining a sketch she herself drew, the information was relayed to officers in the area and they began going door to door and printing posters. 80 officers were assigned to the case from the morning of the 5th, and they proclaimed that they were open to all possibilities, so encouraged anyone to come forward with evidence or information. Since no sounds of the vehicle were heard and given the time of day the incident occurred, the police suspected that the person involved in the crime was local, but other than this and the girlfriend's description, they still had little else constructive to go on. Security camera footage in the streets around the area also seemed to turn up nothing. Naturally, as part of their routine investigation, the authorities looked into the family and friends. With how close and cooperative the family were, however, they were immediately ruled out. Shota's friends and girlfriend were likewise ruled out. Although Shota may have been in minor squabbles with his friends like all people at that age, there's nothing at all to suggest any acquaintances or associates were involved in the incident, especially because the girlfriend was quoted as saying she did not know who the person that attacked them was.
Yeah.
Other than a few locals who heard screams and shouts, there were no
and it didn't look like
witnesses of the
their
attack
age.
other than the girlfriend who could provide information. She understandably had a terrifying and traumatic experience and was also having difficulty remembering many of the details. It was just such a quick and unexpected event. And so the investigators had to make do with what they had. Since multiple footprints were found in the blood and no sounds of a vehicle were heard speeding away, it is believed that the perpetrator had fled the scene on foot. With the inflicted wounds being found mostly around the neck and on top of the head, it appeared that the perpetrator's motive was murder, especially when considering that none of Shota's valuables had been taken and he had not been searched. It was a very vicious attack that showed that the person responsible was an extremely dangerous individual who may have had a strong grudge against Shota, but the police kept an open mind and were quite meticulous, pursuing all possibilities.
I feel like it's gonna be it's just
Once the crime
random.
scene had been fully
He decided on the spot to kill
analyzed, Shota's
Shota.
family and friends were able to go to the site to show their respects. The girlfriend's grandmother went to pray at the site to thank Shota for defending his girlfriend and allowing her to escape harm. And then, 6 days after the incident,
The knife.
a breakthrough. Someone cleaning a gutter about 100 meters west from the crime scene came across a small knife. Unfortunately, they knew of the incident of Shota and so reported it.
Lucky.
The police had actually searched this very gutter extensively right.
I was literally about to say, like, I don't know if it's too much to expect them to check stuff like the gutter close to the crime scene. And, you know, like 100 meters still sounds close to me, but I don't know. So they have checked it.
After the incident, so according to reports, the knife must have been dumped later on after the area search had concluded. The knife had been carefully cleaned with various products and wiped, which sadly removed all fingerprints from it. However, even still, some blood was detected, and after testing, it matched Shota's. The length was also consistent with the depth of the wounds. This was certainly the murder weapon. The circumstances surrounding the knife told the authorities that the criminal must have been someone local, since it seemed that they took the weapon home, cleaned it, and then disposed of it a few days later. The location of both the item and the crime scene was also extremely residential, where strangers were not likely to wander around, especially at night. When questioned by the media if it had been overlooked by investigators, the authorities rebutted any concerns, reporting that, "We believe someone threw it away after the search investigation."
I don't know if this is an excuse or not.
The
It's the
perpetrator
same.
was likely following the reports on the news. They got to work tracing the item's roots at once, but while it was a crucial piece of evidence, it didn't offer much info about the perpetrator at this time in the investigation. An analysis of Shota's clothes did, however, and they were thankfully able to collect some of the perpetrator's DNA. When run through the national database, no matches came back, so whoever did this, they had no criminal record, and this was likely their first offense.
Alright.
Around the time of Shota's birthday, also 6 days after his passing, his friends held a birthday party in his honor. This 17th birthday party allowed them to pay their respects
That's so
and tell
sad.
many stories about Shota to the bereaved family. This kindness encouraged the family during this dark time to keep going, as Satoshi was quoted as saying, "Shota had so many good friends that I almost envy him." Those same good friends also attended Shota's funeral, which seems to have been packed from the available footage, testament of his popularity. Satoshi was utterly distraught and was understandably weeping at the loss of his dear son. Friends had kind words to say about him at this time too.
もうびっくりして信じられなかったですね。優しくていろいろ明るくてよく喋ってくれた人なんで。
Every night since it happened, parents Satoshi and Masako would take Shota's beloved dog E for a walk at the same time he was
the dog.
attacked, visiting both the vending machine corner and the road where
And
he
that's another thing that makes me almost want to cry. I mean, the dog has no idea, right? Like, why is he not here anymore? Why is he not petting me? Why is he not walking me? The dog has no idea. That's so freaking sad.
eventually passed away. I can't even imagine the thoughts that went through their minds as they did this, especially when the criminal was still on the loose. but maybe it helped them process what had happened and feel closer to their departed son. Satoshi especially was taking things hard and was filled with regret. He thought if only he had stopped his son that day, if only he'd forced him to enter into a different club so he didn't develop a love for baseball. That guilt, however, soon turned into a strong drive to catch his son's killer. Satoshi himself wrote and printed 3,500 leaflets and posters to distribute around the area, hoping that someone, anyone, would come forward. He made this a frequent activity, and in the subsequent years, he also went to a nearby train station, especially on the anniversary of the incident, to distribute leaflets along with police, other family members, and Shota's friends. An official sketch of the individual was made based on the girlfriend's description to be used in the hunt for the criminal. The police and family alike were working very hard to find the culprit. With Shota's friends at his side, Satoshi couldn't help but think his son would look a little like them, which made him sad, but also provides him with some comfort too. Satoshi would give talks to schools about his son, about what happened, and the impact it had on him and his family. He also gave talks to newly recruited police officers to inspire them in their work, and gave many media interviews, some of which you've seen, in order to spread awareness of this terrible event in order to help gain information from the public. With fear that the crime would be forgotten the
I'm glad that he said, well, it's a spoiler, right, but that this is a solved case, because in many other KyotoRobato video, similar things happen, someone gets killed and the family is just non-stop, flyers, always contacting the police and doing everything to keep the case alive and find the culprit. And like many of these cases, basically, they do it for decades and there's no information. So at least in this one, we know that it's gonna get caught.
more time passed, Satoshi and the authorities worked doggedly to keep people aware, to keep Shota in people's minds. But sadly, in terms of the investigation, things were moving very little. Investigators brought the girlfriend back to the area to do an in-person, on-the-site investigation on the 22nd of October 2010. But as she didn't know the person, it was very dark and happened so quickly, she couldn't offer much more than she already did. She also seems to have started to forget some elements, likely due to trauma.
Yeah.
In the local area, police interviewed roughly 14,000 residents, but failed to get any damning evidence or information. On the 7th of December 2012, a 3 million yen reward, roughly $30,000 at the time, was established to better entice people to come forward with any tips. Over the years, information from the public would trickle in, and Shota's family would continue to work towards catching the criminal themselves, even going door to door posting leaflets, but nothing concrete would come through, no matter how hard they or the police tried. Fortunately, there was a bit of a breakthrough at last. The authorities never gave up on tracing the murder weapon they found in the gutter, and 6 years after the incident, in October 2016, the North Kobe police force announced that they were looking for someone who bought the exact same type of knife being sold at the nearby large retailer, Jusco. The person had been caught on the
6 years to find that.
at the store.
That's insane.
He had purchased the item on the 26th of September 2010, just 8 days before the incident. As typical of Japanese police, they sadly didn't release this security footage to the public, and even didn't disclose that they had it until years later, likely because they wanted to exhaust other leads before divulging that they had it, since it could alert the perpetrator and cause them to hide even more.
Something that in other KyotoRobato video they do as well. And I guess in this one it works out, but in some of the other cases it feels like a waste. But like, it already feel like they had more or less like reached a point where there's no reason not to release the footage, but they don't release the footage.
However, the authorities did reveal some crucial pieces of information. Some of what they unveiled about the person purchasing the knife was different from what the girlfriend described. Instead of being in his late 20s or early 30s, he was described as being in his late teens or early 20s. And instead of being between 160 to 170 centimeters tall, he was said to be 165 to 175 centimeters tall.
I mean, that's hard to
At
tell.
the time he purchased the knife, the man was wearing a black and red checkered top, and more definingly, blue Puma trousers. They also noticed an intriguing habit he had of folding his arms and slightly hunching over when walking. As you can see, these details were also put on posters and leaflets, often together with the previous eyewitness information. And although they had no information about the person other than that they bought the same knife used to take the life of Shota a few days before his passing, he was considered a person of significant interest. They wanted to track him down. Sadly though, this didn't lead to much right away, and the years kept going by without results, without the perpetrator facing justice, and with the family continuing to suffer. It would be almost 11 years later,
I mean, they'll suffer
10
even if
years
she's
and 10
found.
months to be precise,
10
before
years.
something truly great would happen.
Okay.
A massive breakthrough that solved the case. The perpetrator talked. Fortunately, he was something of a narcissist, and confided in some friends in a bragging manner about how he had murdered someone when he was younger, and had mentioned this case specifically. He literally gloated about his actions
Idiot.
to elicit sympathy
Good.
and admiration from his peers. Luckily, it seemed one of the friends had taken it more than something of a joke, and after looking up the case themselves,
You know, it reminds me of like when I was in high school or even middle school, there was like, you know, the type of kids that would always make up lies to make themselves seem cool. And there was one in particular that would always talk about how he and his dad killed some guy and dumped him into a lake. And, you know, so many of like the lies he would tell were obvious lie. You know, like we were like 12 and he would talk about, you know, he was sleeping with all those women, or he was doing this and that, stuff that, you know, clearly nobody believed him, right? But we would all listen to his stories. But that one he was repeating, and like no one really believed him. But what if it was true, right? Probably not. But it's the kind of thing where, yeah, like, what if it was true? It's kind of like years later I was thinking back on this time and that guy. It was definitely a lie, but yeah.
they reported the friend to the police. When the authorities looked into the supposed man the friend tipped off, they really started to have their suspicions that there might be some truth to his story. The man lived in a town called Toyoyama, Aichi Prefecture, with his parents, but 5 years prior, he'd been living with his grandmother in the northern ward of Kobe, right where the crime took place, and had been living there at the time Shota passed away. The man also closely matched the physical appearance on the security camera, so investigators went to his Toyoyama home early in the morning on the 4th of August 2021, and he was brought into Komaki police station for voluntary questioning. And it was then that he admitted he was responsible, that he had taken the life of innocent Shota. It was just like that. After 11 years of investigation, involving a total of 33,000 investigators and 920 pieces of information from the public, it was all over because of a single tip. The one
that is insane, right? I mean, it really shows it's more of a miracle than not when criminals get catch sometime, because here there was all this resource and it took the guy himself saying I did it. Otherwise, they were never going to get him, right?
Tip that really mattered most. An investigator called the Tsutsumi family home to inform them of the good news, and Satoshi answered. The investigator said, "We arrested him. We arrested him." Satoshi was utterly stunned, saying, "Huh? What?" He had waited for this day for over a decade.
And I feel like crying.
His son's case had been a horrible part of his life that no parent should ever have to endure, but finally, the news he had desired for so long arrived. Unable to speak out of shock, Satoshi jotted down he was arrested on a notepad and tossed it to his wife. Then the couple, and even the officer on the other side of the line, all began to cry tears of joy.
Feel like
The
crying.
authorities also held a press conference to the media to announce the news.
Can't imagine.
午前11時42分に被疑者を殺人罪で通常逮捕しました。被疑者は犯行当時17歳の A 男、
So he was actually someone
But it
their age, huh?
wouldn't be long before the family would learn something else, would once again prove to be another source of pain and frustration.
Was he simply like, he was jealous of seeing a couple?
You see, the perpetrator, while 28 years old when caught, was 17 years old when he committed the crime. As such, he was not an adult under Japanese law, and therefore
Bruh.
under the protection of the country's juvenile laws, which favor even the worst offenders rather than the victims and their families. If you're a viewer of this channel, you'll likely know something about this. The criminal's name
The Junko case and many others, right? I always say it, but it is insane to me. I understand, you know, under a certain age, but you can't tell me like a 16, 17-year-old, you know, stabbing someone to death shouldn't face full responsibility. I mean, I don't know what age should be the limit, right? Maybe under 14, you know? Like, whatever is considered teen. Like, once you're a teen, if you kill someone like that, you should be, like, you shouldn't have any immunity. I don't know.
and face could not be released under Article 61 of the juvenile law, even to the Tsutsumi family early on. Almost no information was revealed other than that he was a 28-year-old man who lived in Aichi Prefecture and was working part-time in advertising and sales at a shopping center, where he was said to be a serious, reliable worker who got on well with others and never missed work without reason. Around the time of the incident, when he was 17, he dropped out of school, moved out of his parents' home in Aomori Prefecture, and moved to his grandmother's Kobe home, where he became a recluse, or hikikomori as it is known in Japanese. He had little contact with his family at all, and it appeared he had not registered his residence in the area, all reasons as to why he may have slipped through the cracks during the initial investigations. He also left the area to live with his parents again shortly after committing the crime in order to get away. It was confirmed, though, that he didn't know Shota, and Shota didn't know him. They were complete strangers, yet this person had callously taken Shota's life away. When asked about his motive,
Insane.
the man stated, "I saw him with a girl and got angry." In
I knew
other
it.
words,
It's a
seems
fucking
he
incel.
senselessly murdered Shota out of petty jealousy, as we
Okay, but we know he bought the knife like 8 days before, so...
already knew and suspected. Poor Shota was completely innocent and didn't deserve what happened to him at all. And to conclusively prove that he wasn't lying, they tested the man's DNA to that found on Shota's shirt, and it was a match. This was definitely the person. Since Japan's confounded juvenile laws were still in action for this 28-year-old man, he was not placed in a jail with other adult criminals, and instead was put into a facility for people much younger than him with greater freedom and protection of privacy. Even when walking between buildings after his arrest, blue tarp walls were prepared to keep the media and public from catching a glimpse of him, leaving them only managing to see his feet. The family were naturally extremely frustrated by the situation.
Again, I don't understand, like, why? I understand that it's probably like, you know, you are legally an adult. Well, actually, in Japan it's 21. I was going to say at 18. That's what we have in France, right? So then this kind of law of what is considered a juvenile is as simple as that. It's under the what you consider an adult, right? The laws have to work with each other. But even then, it just sounds stupid. I mean, when I was 12, 13, 14, like, I was totally capable of stabbing someone to death and knowing what I'm doing. Like, you know, so why should I face less than... I don't know. It's stupid.
Knowing that the person responsible for Shota's death might at best get a life sentence not fit for the crime, or worse, get no punishment at all, as has happened to others in the past, was an extreme source of anxiety.
Yeah.
Satoshi had struggled with sleep in the years after his son's death, routinely waking up around the time his son passed away, but now he was getting almost no sleep at all. He couldn't until the trial.
I can only imagine.
Satoshi had demonstrated a lot throughout the years. He was strong and determined for his son, so got to work. He bought numerous books about the Japanese juvenile laws to study up, and consulted with lawyers to make sure his son got justice and the perpetrator got a punishment worthy of the crime. Japan's juvenile laws cannot give someone under the age of 18 a full life sentence, even for such cases as murder, often only sentencing people to between 10 and 20 years, and the prosecution naturally sought the maximum of 20 years. This was the best the family could do.
That's
The
it.
defendant, however, incredibly argued that a mere 8 years was appropriate, and the defendant, along with the defense lawyers, used every trick in the book to try to weasel out of any due punishment. During his first public hearing on the 7th of June 2023, the now 30-year-old perpetrator admitted that he had stabbed Shota multiple times, but unbelievably claimed that he did not intend to kill him, despite the viciousness of the attack and the location of the wounds around vital areas. He even claimed that he didn't think stabbing someone with a knife would be painful or cause wounds. The prosecution
Classic. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised. This is what the defense would do, yeah. Claim that, you know, he didn't know what he was doing. He was going through a rough time. You know, he was an ikikomori. He didn't have much of a real understanding of life. You know, they're gonna try to weasel out of it.
I'd hit back with, the defendant had the intent to kill and was fully responsible for his actions, able to judge right from wrong, and able to refrain from committing the crime of his own volition. The defense tried to argue about the defendant's mental state, claiming, at the time of the crime, he was not in a normal mental state and was not aware that what he did was a violent act that would result in the victim's death.
That's just a stupid
They
thing to
stuck
say.
to the idea that it was difficult to say he was fully responsible for his actions. The defendant also stated to a mental health doctor who examined him after his arrest that he did not know why he had to murder someone. During the trial, a number of details about the defendant were also revealed, and it is truly shocking how this person was able to go unnoticed for so long. In January 2010, 9 months before the incident with Shota, he threatened the friend of an ex-girlfriend with a knife. This was actually the thing that made him drop out of high school. After
Yes.
moving to the home of his grandmother on his mother's side in Kobe during April of that year, he returned back to Aomori briefly, where he stabbed his ex-girlfriend in the arm with a screwdriver, and a month later in September, he saw a couple on the subway in Kobe and suddenly strangled the man for no reason at all. The couple had no idea who he was, and this has clear similarities
So all this and he had no criminal record? Man. Okay.
to the case at hand. This happened just a month before his attack on Shota. All these incidents show that the defendant was an extremely dangerous and violent individual, willing to assail people he doesn't even know, as well as use deadly weapons. The prosecution also got some bad news. The defendant would face no additional charges for the 10 years and 10 months he spent as a free man, intentionally avoiding punishment and prolonging the suffering of the family. For Satoshi and everyone involved really, each day of freedom after the incident felt like a crime in itself, but sadly the trial was only for murder.
僕らはその10年10ヶ月苦しんできた。
I mean, you know, I always watch true crime and I always end up just feeling pissed off at like the law, right? Justice. It's like that for case in all the different countries. Like I feel like 9 out of 10, I'm just like, this is fucking stupid, this justice system. I feel like that's kind of like the jinx of my reaction to true crime videos. It's absolutely fucking insane how broken it is most of the time. And it's like that in so many countries. Like, how does any of this make sense? Genuinely. And it's not even like just one time. It's like, again, 9 out of 10, it feels like the punishment isn't even close to fitting the crime. Especially when you compare to like lesser crime, you know, people like getting years for like stealing, maybe scamming, maybe, I don't know, you know, like a simple fight or like drugs or something. They get sometimes like decades versus people who kill. Sometimes they only get like a decade or 2 in prison for killing someone, ending their life. You have to be fucking joking.
However, at the same time, something good also happened. Finally, Satoshi could come face to face with the person who murdered his son and
I don't know if that's good.
directly talk to him.
なぜ翔太があなたに殺されないといけなかったんですか？
家の近くまでやってきた不良グループの一人だと思ったからです。
被害者が何か危害を加えましたか？
危害を加えられていません。
なぜ人を殺してはいけないかわからなかったんですよね。今はわかりますか？何歳からわかるようになったんですか
27歳です。
その時、謝ろうとは思わなかったんですか？
事件の記憶が薄くなっていました。思い出すことができなかったです。
The defendant claimed that when he saw his arrest warrant, it was the first time he remembered the crime. But we know this is a lie since, as already stated, he had bragged about murdering someone before his arrest. The family left the trial quite frustrated and spoke with the media.
Can
The
only
defendant
imagine.
showed no remorse for his crimes at all and offered no sincere apologies for what he had done. He showed barely any emotion and certainly no sympathy.
未だ罪の意識ってないんでしょうね。いや、謝罪にも何にもなってないでしょう。責任はないけど謝罪するって何とも納得いかんでしょう。
The mother Masako was also having a difficult time.
どう思ってるんでしょうね。翔太に対して本当に謝ってるんか答えが出てこないですよね。
On the 23rd of June
Fucking sad.
2023, the Kobe District Court had another trial. Luckily, after consulting experts, they concluded that the defendant and the lawyers were lying about his mental state, and that he was fully aware of the crimes that he did and would take full responsibility for them. They deduced that he had intended to kill and knew the consequences of those actions both at the time and now. And with that, he was sentenced to 18 years in prison, 2
That's
years
it.
shy of the 20 years desired by the prosecutors. The courts had accepted the prosecution's argument, but reduced it from the maximum limit, stating that they cannot ignore that the defendant was 17 years old at the time of the crime and had no prior convictions.
Which again, like, this sounds fucking stupid as well, right? Like, we literally were told that even though I guess it was never reported to the cops, you know, like, even before that, he was a menace to society. Even before killing someone. I don't know, this is pissing me off so much.
It's disappointing that the defendant would get such a low sentence and be protected by the juvenile laws, but it could have been much worse, and was actually
Sure.
one of the highest sentences for such crimes. The court had fortuitously taken into account the cruelty of the crime, the fact that Shota was completely innocent, and the lack of remorse displayed by the defendant. The defendant immediately began appeal proceedings, but on the 20th of June 2025, the Osaka High Court upheld the ruling and dismissed the appeal. He may get a reduced sentence with good behavior, and there is still the final appeal to clear at the highest court, but as of now, he will serve his sentence and be in prison for 18 years. At 32
Which
years
is
old at the time of
nothing.
sentencing, that means he will be released at 50 years old if he serves it in full. Satoshi stated that until the highest court appeal is cleared, there will be no rest for him or his family. On the 24th of October,
I mean, I still feel like there will be no rest, right? I mean, can you imagine? Even if they're like not hateful people, I'm just a viewer and I'm feeling like pure hatred toward the guy. So knowing that, you know, he might only serve like 10 to 15 with good behavior, if he has good behavior, and, you know, then he's back as a free man, and your son is still dead, I mean, you're still gonna be haunted for the rest of your life.
2023, the Kobe District Court also ordered that the defendant's family should pay the bereaved Tsutsumi family 93 million yen, roughly $630,000 as the current exchange rate goes, in compensation for their son's crimes.
And he destroyed his own
Presiding
family.
Judge Akira Maruta noted that the fear, pain, and regret Shota must have felt in his final moments were immeasurable, and so the family were entitled to such compensation. However,
you still measured it to
the Tsutsumi family were
600,000.
actually pursuing a separate lawsuit against the perpetrator's family and were seeking 149 million yen, just over $1 million US. This money would cover funeral expenses for Shota, loss of profits for the family business, make up for the vicious slander online, as well as reimburse the family for the severe mental anguish. I cannot find any information about the
And all the
progress of
lawyers and
this
stuff.
lawsuit, but I hope the family wins and that they get every penny of that 149 million yen. Although the Japanese juvenile law was revised in 2022 to favor perpetrators of the crimes less, because he was 17 at the time of the crime back in 2010, his identity wasn't disclosed even after he was indicted and remains unconfirmed to this day. Although of course not verified at all, the alleged identity has been leaked online. There's no way of knowing 100% if it is him, however, so it is not worth dwelling on too much. Although I certainly won't reveal anything concrete about this person myself, I will share some of his writings. The following is an excerpt from a long post that was written on his blog a month before his capture. I will highlight some comments I personally find particularly telling. It is entitled Hatred Sublimation. I wrote this with the hope that it might be of some help to those who are troubled by feelings of hatred on a daily basis. However, I will write solely from my own experience. The bottom line, to supplement hate, you need to act within legal limits to the point where you have no time for idleness. If you talk about feelings of hatred, people will distance themselves. This is because most of people have never experienced intense hatred. Having never experienced it means that it is difficult to imagine, a source of fear, and evokes negative emotions. People dislike negative emotions, and so it's only natural to distance themselves from those who exude them. Even if someone listens to you, they won't sympathize. Ironically, the more you talk, the more people will distance themselves. You will realize that people you thought of as your friends were actually just fragile relationships that tend to drift apart when you face difficulties. You'll realize that they were merely acquaintances. At the same time, you will feel a mixture of doubt and anger, wondering why.
Reading this makes me think like if you already had this kind of thinking and feelings, and he probably did since we know his history of violence when he was like a teen, maybe part of all this is the mental health system failed him as well. I have no idea of the rest of the circumstance, but this guy clearly had some issues. It wasn't just like teenager rebelling. It was way beyond that. And I guess it maybe tried to talk to people, his friend or his family, and they just thought he was weird. No one maybe tried to get, lead him toward maybe therapy or professionals, right? Who knows what might have happened, if he was led towards stuff like that.
Why don't they understand? But this is also a great opportunity to get to know yourself. Turn the feeling of why don't they understand me towards yourself. In other words, ask yourself, do I understand myself? In my case, I don't understand anything at all. Even though I have a habit of harboring this feeling of why don't they understand me towards those I don't understand myself. It's often said that nothing comes from hatred, and that is certainly true. If you're consumed by hatred, you quickly lose your sense of ethics, becoming indifferent to the physical and mental pain of others. Your relationships fall apart, you become overcome by depression and very dark thoughts, and eventually those thoughts become a reality. However, if you can sublimate the powerful force that comes from hatred, it's a different story. Sublimating hatred is certainly difficult. Support from those around you is also important for sublimation.
Sublimation.
Support means understanding, patience, and above all, continuing to give love. Giving love sometimes means deliberately pushing someone away, deliberately leaving them alone, and even deliberately scolding them. The most important,
says
and at
the
the same
mother,
time the most difficult, in the process of sublimating hatred is knowing yourself. Knowing yourself means facing and acknowledging your own weakness and ugly parts. The reason many people avoid this step of knowing
This is so
themselves
annoying
is
to listen
probably
to.
because it would hurt the self they cherish above all else. Knowing yourself also means battling severe loneliness. Knowing yourself is like rubbing salt into a wound and then hitting it with a sledgehammer, but it's necessary in order to sublimate hatred. You must bring the hammer down on yourself, the person you've always cherished above all else, over and over again. Prepare.
It's so fucking disgusting listening to this. He's trying to talk like he's wise in some way. He's someone who has like terrible feelings, but he's doing such a good job at, facing himself and like keeping it in check when it's not even true. motherfucker killed someone, like a random innocent person, and then he's writing this kind of thing, trying to act like, you know, he's actually a good boy who is fighting himself.
To destroy them. That's how powerful hatred can be. As you continue to swing the hammer, refusing to give up, you'll start to see something through the cracks. That's narcissism. Your narcissism grows, creating a tough shell, and you realize that the pattern on the shell is the image of yourself you've seen in the mirror until now. As you face your narcissism head-on, you'll realize that whenever something inconvenient happens, you've always blamed others and played the victim. You'll realize that you'll always be self-centered. You'll realize that you never made an effort to put yourself in the other person's shoes. But the suffering continues. This suffering likely comes from a breakdown in your ego. You've destroyed the person you firmly believe to be unjustified, and it's extremely painful. You'll be overcome with feelings of emptiness, depression, and despair, wondering, who exactly am I? And is there any meaning to life? If you let your guard down, the narcissism you thought you destroyed will begin to sprout again. So you need to consciously
How much more is there of this? I
analyze
can't
your
listen to
emotions
it.
and correct your course accordingly. Small steps.
You know what, I think let's skip this part because I can't stand his writing. Knowing what he did, it's just pissing me off to the max. I get the point though. I get the point.
Determination,
I get the fucking
patience,
point.
and resignation are the most useful things in life. I'm no expert on psychology. I'm not good at interpreting how others feel through their writings, and often find judgments based on such writings unhelpful, but I sense the perpetrator was projecting quite a lot in this blog, and is clearly a narcissist. The highlighted comments especially are quite telling, and the repeated mentioning of illegal activities really point to the perpetrator knowing full well what they did was wrong, despite stating otherwise in the courts. The comments about friends also make me feel as though he is talking about the friend who reported him to the authorities, which eventually led to his capture. Perhaps he spoke to this friend about the murder in hopes that the friend would understand why he did it. The comment about illegal behavior being unrewarded except for a lucky few is also one I find particularly disturbing, and clearly shows his bragging nature when he implies it is only very smart and lucky people who get away with their horrible deeds. After being released temporarily from the housing facility he was in before his formal charge, he wrote and released another blog post entitled Demon Sublimation, where he once again repeats statements about doing things illegally, with clear signs of projection once again. It feels as though the perpetrator is trying to make excuses for their actions, as if to say that their underlying hatred for the world, and therefore their mental instability, led to them doing what they did. Just very strange stuff all around, and may even have been an attempt to plant false evidence to support his lies in the trial.
I think the other weird thing is that he didn't, as far as we know, kill anyone else or be violent to anyone else. I mean, what happened in the 10 years after the murder? Like, was he just genuinely a good boy for 10 years?
Speaking of online posts, all throughout the years since the murder, the Tsutsumi family were subjected to some of the most disgusting slander I've ever seen. Online trolls foolishly stated that because Shota had dyed hair, he was somehow a delinquent and deserved what happened to him. They callously claimed that it was his own fault for being out at night, and that he received bad parenting. Shockingly, some even went as far as to say that they were happy about what happened, and tried to give up details about Shota's girlfriend. These lies and nasty words naturally had a horrible effect on the family, and made living with the pain of losing their son even harder. But as you can tell by now, they were very strong in the face of such things, and continued to fight for justice for Shota. As is custom in Japan for deceased loved ones, the family kept a small shrine to Shota in their home to show their respects. They regularly offer Coca-Cola, Shota's favorite drink, and covered the area in loving photos of him together with friends and family. While he may have passed on, his memory lives on in the hearts of those left behind. Shota's picture is also a common feature at important family events. When his siblings got married, seats were reserved to display a photo of him as though his spirit were there in attendance. Clearly, he was well loved, and his family cared for him deeply. While the family will never truly be able to overcome the loss of Shota, It's good that the criminal was caught and received some punishment for his crimes.
I guess.
It gave the bereaved family a little closure which they desperately needed and deserved, and helped ease their loss. Although it is likely that the perpetrator will be released one day and once again become a danger to society, I hope he feels the weight of what he has done for the rest of his life.
Probably not.
Thank you for watching my 49th YouTube video. If you liked it, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and subscribe if you wish to see more videos like this about Japanese cases.
Amazing video as always from Mr. KyotoRobato. I guess the last thing I was wondering is like, do we know if the girlfriend did okay after everything? You know, clearly the family, I don't know if I would say they did okay, but you know, they never gave up and all that. Hopefully the girlfriend was able to continue her life. You know, she was the one that saw things happen almost directly. You know, you can only imagine that she also had like a lot of thoughts like, what if when we saw this weird guy, we decided to just go, I told him, he's weird, let's go or something. But yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's like, it's a solved case, but yeah, it's still as frustrating as some of the other one. Not as much as the unsolved one, but the fact that the guy is not getting life in prison, you know, it's just fucked. I don't know, you kill someone, you murder someone in cold blood. How do you not get life in prison? That's always what I will say. There's no like anything more complicated than that. This one is straightforward. Yeah. Great video. Fucking sad. Okay, well, as I always say, I've watched literally every single other KyotoRobato video, so that's why I can't really watch more on this stream. It was just lucky that it's October and there's a new video to watch from him. But yeah, if you guys have never watched the channel, I'm not subscribed here, but I'm subscribed on my other account. Really amazing. I've been watching for like 2 years, I think. At the time I had catched up to all the videos, and since then I never miss a video. I mean,